Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. It's Phil here today with Logan and John. Episode number 145. And we're going to talk about making copies of pieces and turning them into projects. We'll also talk about some tool stuff and updates at Popular Woodworking and Woodsmith and just all kinds of other fun stuff. And don't forget to stick around for this episode's free plan later on in the show. This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is brought to you by Titebond. You want a glue that you can trust, and fortunately, Titebond has the glue you need to get the job done with confidence. From interior glues with strong initial tack and short clamp time to exterior glues with exceptional strength and water resistance, look to Titebond, the right glue for your next project. For more information, visit Titebond.com.
Now, I want to point out, people need to make sure they call fast because those free plans are going to sell out.
Right. Yeah.
So they need to make sure
while supplies last.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. We only have a limited number of PDFs.
That's right.
Last week, we talked about... The episode was called Sneaking Spoons Across the Border, and Logan's perhaps getting another lathe plus stroke sander, maybe?
Maybe.
So
we'll see.
Had a couple of responses to that. Glenn writes, "My dad's father was a carpenter. He was also a fine craftsman. I remember his shop. It was the second floor of a multi-unit garage. Don't recall many specifics about the shop, but I do recall that he had a stroke sander. I was 5 or 6 at the time, and the sander appeared to be enormous. Even when you're an adult, they're enormous, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for me, I didn't develop an interest in woodworking until long after he passed away." George writes, "I had a stroke sander in the high school wood shop where I taught. It took a 298-inch belt.
Yes.
The students loved using it and called it Big Wally. Why not? The school's insurance company made us get rid of it because there was no way to put guards on it. I thought it was stupid because in the 30 years I had no injuries ever happen." Another guy, Kevin, talked about, because Logan brought up that New Yankee Workshop is on the YouTubes, as if you needed more reason to spend time on YouTube. But New Yankee Workshop is there. Kevin Thomas writes, "I got into woodworking from watching the New Yankee Workshop." Jeff Kowalski says, "It took me until minute 38:55 of the last episode to remove and install a bandsaw blade, tension it, true it, and successfully test resaw some cherry. Thanks for the backroom chatter."
All right.
So are we trying too hard, or is he not trying hard enough if it took that much of our podcast?
It's probably just had to stop and chuckle and laugh and
Probably.
all that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it took longer.
Yeah, so we love hearing your comments and questions that go along with it. You can email us, woodsmith@woodsmith.com. Put it in the comment section on our YouTube channel, making sure you subscribe, or drop us a postcard. That still works too sometimes. So
I'm just thinking 286 inches?
yeah,
Is that what he said?
290 something, yeah.
290? My bandsaw mill blades are 167 inches.
Wow.
Like, that's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
that's huge.
That's a lot of grits on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
By my calculations, that's at least 2 football fields. I just did that in my head real quick.
Yeah. That seems right. So are you getting the stroke sander?
I don't know. I haven't driven out there yet. I mean, it was kind of in passing when Norman said, "Oh, I got a stroke sander you should take too." And you don't like. I mean, I think that saying, "Well, what about that second machine too?" is maybe pressing my luck until I'm there. Then we'll see. Let's get the lathe loaded up first before I start prying on the other machinery.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're like almost to the point where you're going to have to start thinking about adding on to your shop that's not even done.
My wife made that exact comment yesterday. Yeah. We'll see. I got half the building that's storage, and I never really, I mean, I said the camper has to go in there, but the rest of it, like, can be whatever storage, right? Like,
Right.
I haven't parked my truck inside of our garage for 5 years now. Why do I need to park it in the garage, in the shop for the next 5 years?
Right.
You fit a whole lot of machinery where
Or you get like one of those
sits.
like auto lifts where you just lift it up. So you have like another lathe above the one lathe.
Yes. See, I do like the idea of having, like, we've talked about this. There's a few things I think I would enjoy having two of. Okay?
Okay.
Bandsaw's one, because I think you set one up for resawing. That's your resaw. And
Right.
your other one's your other everything else
Yeah.
saw, right? I never thought I needed two table saws, although seeing my guy Willie Sandry out in Portland writes a lot for Popwood. He has two. He has a saw stop, and then he has a Laguna. And he has one set up as his dado saw. No. Kind of. He has one set up as his like ripping and cross-cutting saw, and then he has one set up as what he calls his joinery saw.
Okay.
In our shop here in the office, we have, I would say we kind of have two saws. We got a dado saw, we got a cutting saw. We actually have two different, standard cutting saws, but we have one that's always has a dado blade. I could see the argument for having two table saws. I do think having two lathes, however, would kind of be fun.
Right.
Because if I'm working on a big, huge hollow form, which I would like to start doing some really big hollow forms, I'm talking like 3 foot long ones, it'd be really nice to be able to set one up and just leave it. You know what I mean? Like you get the stay your rest, everything set up, you get the hollowing, the boring bars and the arms and everything set up, and then you just let it sit. So.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Like, if you have two lathes, do you have one that's kind of like a bowl lathe and another one that's a spindle lathe? Or is that not that much of a setup issue difference?
It's not that much of a setup issue. Because really, you're just, in my opinion, you're just pulling a chuck off and putting a spur drive on.
Right.
So, not that big a deal. I think it's more of like, the biggest setup on a lathe is going to be the steady rests, so the things that capture the form with wheels,
Sure.
To help support some weight, and the boring bars, because the boring bars and the hollowing systems a lot of times get bolted to the bed.
Oh, yeah.
So once you get all that stuff bolted on, and a big hollow form takes a long time to turn, so you're probably gonna do it in 4 or 5 settings. So, it's funny, and not to turn every podcast into a discussion about buying unnecessary crap, but that's kind of how I roll. There's a 24-inch metal lathe here, like 3 miles north of me for sale, and it's for sale for a really good price.
Right.
What I think is a really good price. I'm not going to go buy it because I'm screaming uncle. Like,
Yeah.
You're
all lathed up.
I need my wife to stay with me, so I'm not going to go get it. But it's like, ooh, hey, if that's still there in a year, maybe we go get it. So
You can always get it and then flip it, down the road.
that's always what I say I'm going to do with stuff, John, and I never do it.
So that's a good discussion question for people who are going to comment or who haven't commented. Like, what tools in your shop are worth having multiples of? And I guess I would leave out like the drill driver sort of thing, or tools that already come in sets. Like, don't tell me that you have 6 chisels. But if you have multiple sets of chisels, like in different styles, then tell me why, because that would be an interesting discussion. And
No Norm has multiple routers.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, having multiple routers is nice because you can have one in the router table, one handheld, maybe have a little compact router.
Yeah, and I never thought I would actually be one of those guys because I'm cheap. And so I thought, I have my 690, like that's all the router that you need. And just deal with one router. Like, you know, our ancestors crossed the prairie and covered wagons. I can take my router out of the router table and use it handheld and then put it back in. And then I got a little Bosch Colt router, and it's like, it's nice to have two routers.
Yeah. Not saying that you have to go out when you're starting woodworking and buy 3 routers. It's
Right.
something to collect over time.
Yes, that's true. You can work a long time. I mean, my dad was a woodworker for probably close to 40 years before he got a second router. So it's possible. And I did my woodworking 20 plus years before I got a second router. So it does work.
Yeah.
Because I was like / don't like the people who it's like, you can do X operation with just these 3 tools. I don't and wouldn't, but you could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think with routers, you just start out like doing edge profiles and stuff, and just having one router's, okay for that. So when you start getting into joinery and all kinds of other stuff that, you figure out that how useful routers are. And
yeah. And then you start, then the question that I would have for people is, say you have multiple routers. Do you in your shop have more than one router table?
It's a lot of flat real estate that you're taking
Yeah.
up with 2 router tables.
Says the guy with 2 lathes.
yeah.
Well, okay, yes. Technically, technically I do have 2 right now. But yes, but I'm just thinking, like, that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of square footage.
True.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. But like in the same way that you can justify 2 lathes, there are those who would or 2 bandsaws. Somebody could justify 2 router tables that you could have one with, that you have set up for pattern work, with a pretty stout flush trim bit or a pattern bit in there. And then another one for, mill work, for lack of a better term, that you just swap out different profile bits or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe one's a full-size router table, and maybe you have another compact router table or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because most of the time you can get stuff done on small router tables.
Yeah. Now, I will say, I would highly consider, would you consider a router and a shaper the same tool, or just inherently different enough?
I guess for the kinds of things that, your average Woodsmith, Popular Woodworking reader, if they had a shaper plus a router table, I would call those more or less interchangeable tools.
Tool. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
See, I
you're
was gonna say,
probably using them for the same sorts of things.
Yeah. I would consider picking up a big old heavy cast iron shaper.
Okay.
And having that as well as my router table. I would also highly consider putting a router insert in my table saw wing,
Okay.
which I think would be an interesting thing to be able to leave it set up for the most part with, like, a chamfer bit or something like that.
Yeah.
Something you're going to use all the time.
Sure.
So I think that would work out pretty well. Plus, you already have that square footage allocated to your table saw. Pack another tool in it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's a great way to do it. If you're going to have a second one, or, say you have your router table in your table saw wing, then you would add another router table in order to leave your table saw set up or whatever on stuff like that. So, one of the comments and / questions that we get is, talking about must-have or essential tools, or starter sets like that, which are fun discussions and can really quickly get subjective. I think it's also kind of interesting to hear, like, what people would have, like we're talking about right now. What are doubles that you would have that are essential? It wouldn't, like me, I don't have 1 lathe, much less 2, but it's going to be super handy for you. I could see having 2 router tables because I have my one currently is just that compact fold-up router table that we did. And it works great, but I would like to have something that's just a little bit larger with a little beefier of a router in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, I think if you are smart about it, you just get a Shopsmith, and then you get 5 tools in one footprint. That's for all the Shopsmith people. That we are not the same company as Shopsmith.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not Woodsmith plus ShopNotes equals Shopsmith.
No.
Or Woodnotes.
Yeah. I mean, you guys, like, I don't know if people realize that they still make those dang things.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who is buying them? Like, I want to know if somebody's buying them, because kind of odd. for what it, I mean, for what it is, right? Like, so the Mark 7 has 7 woodworking tools. Okay, the Mark 7 has a table saw, a lathe, a drill press, a disc sander, horizontal boring, over under table router, over under table shaper, and then it says 7 functions train clock. I don't know what that means, but so like. I just feel dirty looking at these pictures.
So if you have a Shopsmith and love it, Logan wants to know why. Just why?
Why? Yeah. Well, and they're expensive from what so the Mark 7, which is still available new, is available for $4,800.
Okay.
Now,
which seems reasonable for all of those tools. I mean, if you were going to buy all those tools, it kind of add up.
It does.
I don't know.
I mean, I guess if you're looking at purchasing new, I'm thinking for that price, you could buy higher quality used tools. That would add up to about that price. But again, this is me as an outsider. Full disclosure, I have never used one, so I have no idea what the quality of them are.
Right.
I've never used one, never touched one.
That would be something for, talk to Chuck from the Des Moines Woodworkers, because he has a cabin in northern Wisconsin and spends quite a bit of time up there. And he wanted some woodworking tools up there, but was like, I don't need like a whole duplicate of my shop up there. So he has a Shopsmith up there that he can use for woodworking projects and, maintenance issues around projects around the cabin and stuff like that.
Yeah, the real winner of this podcast is somebody that has 2 Shopsmiths, duplicate Shopsmiths. So comment.
Are they the winner? Are they the winner?
I don't know.
John?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like,
Yeah.
I
mean, just the idea of combination tools is interesting, because you had the Grizzly jointer planer in that it's like lunchbox style, because we have the big Rikon in the shop, which I've come to love. So
it's a great tool.
Yeah. And then you sent me a link for what was it, a Yates American table saw that also had like a little jointer table off on one side and a disc sander.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it felt like every time I looked at that photo that saw had more on it. It was like, wait, is that a jointer?
Yeah, so is everything powered off the same motor? Is it always all running all at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
There's just like belts and, gerbils on the inside, just kind of.
I wonder if you can use them all, like different people using them, different things, or will it bog down?
That would be
know.
interesting to find out. Like, what's the.
Like a whole workstation.
I mean, the table saw and disc sander is kind of a genius idea because.
Yeah,
just spinning wheels.
Well, isn't there somebody makes a disc, like an aluminum disc, to go on your table saw?
Right.
I don't remember.
Yeah, there's quite a few people that do that. I think Forrest has some, and a few other. Like, that was popular for a while. Just having a steel plate that you could put a disc sander on. To me, it was always like, I get it, and again, it probably works really well for some people, but it's just like the wrong orientation, because you're standing to the side of it. It's not, most table saws, you can't really get up to the face of the disc in the way that you would with a standalone disc sander.
Yeah. Sounds like a reader's tip. You just put PSA sandpaper on your table
saw blade. Yeah.
Sand while you cut.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was actually a thing. Not that
sandpaper.
long ago, we got one in where it was a blade, saw blade, that had sandpaper on it. And as you cut it, it sanded the edge. So it was like the Cutco Interslice sanding blade, something or other. I don't remember what it was. Do you remember when that came in, John? We had that?
It seems like, yes, like I've seen that. Maybe I dreamt it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a fever dream.
I mean, it's like I tell my kids, your teacher's probably going to tell you there are no dumb questions. That's a lie. There are dumb questions. And they ask them all the time. And when they say that there's no dumb ideas, there are some dumb ideas. Now, it might work. It might work.
Right.
Doesn't mean it should.
So it'd be interesting to know, like, how many of those Yates American saws were made, because that was a pretty beefy saw. Was it a 10-inch or was it a 12?
It was 10. It was a
10-inch. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I think it was like, it struck me as like a 60s saw, like a 50s or 60s saw.
Kind of looked like it, yeah.
That's kind of what I'm guessing. Kind of when people started to get home from the war, they wanted to pick up a, hobby they could do in their one-stall garage, Yates American, made in America, from recycled German tanks. I don't think they did that, but they should have.
Right. Maybe they did. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
It's actually all the Felder stuff.
Made from recycled German table saws.
Yep. Speaking of which, there is, over by this lathe that I have to go pick up, not to keep circling back to this thing, but there is a sliding Felder table saw over there for sale. It just looks huge, though. Like, It looks like it would take up every square inch of the table saw area I have designated in the shop. Like, the table saw / bench area.
Right.
Like, just like this huge, like, articulating, everything moves on it as you slide a 8-foot panel across it. It looks cool.
Yeah.
And it's a great price because a Felder sliding table saw is north of $15,000 to buy one new.
Right.
Like, they're expensive. So
then you could get one of their expanding dado cutters that they have for them that we talked about. If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, that is true.
I want to thank Tight Bond for their sponsorship of this episode. You want a glue that you can trust, and fortunately, Tight Bond has the glue you need to get the job done with confidence. From interior glues with strong initial tack and short clamp time, to exterior glues with exceptional strength and water resistance, look to Tight Bond, the right glue for your next project. For more information, visit tightbond.com. All right, John, you got any tools that you would have doubles of if you could?
Oh, I don't know. I mentioned the router.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's always nice, like we've said, it's nice having two table saws, especially when you're doing rabbited drawer joinery. Because I always had, like, when we had two table saws down at the other video studio, I'd set one up with, for the fronts and backs, one up for the ends, and just like go back and forth, and rather than changing the setup. But
That's fair.
Other than what we've already mentioned, as far as like the band saws and the table saws, that kind of covers it, I guess. For me, I don't like you. I'm not a lathe person, so I don't need a lathe and that kind of thing. So,
what I would think would be kind of a interesting two-tool combo would be like not two miter saws, because that seems silly, but like a miter saw and a radial arm saw combo.
Okay.
Like have, I mean, I think there's a legitimate reason to have both. Like radial arm saw is great for cutting your arm off and getting big pieces broke down. quickly. But like, I'm one of the few people that probably do this. But like, I do not mind cutting parts to length on the miter saw. Like with a good blade and a well set up saw, you'll get a clean cut. Like you'll get as clean a cut as well as at a table saw. So, I could see having a miter saw station set up for final cut of parts,
right?
But then a radial arm station for breaking stock down.
Sure.
And those could kind of have a shared footprint.
Oh yeah,
they absolutely could.
They can kind of overlap.
Yeah,
right.
So
I think that would be kind of cool.
I didn't think
because I know, and we've been guilty of it. Is you see like get the most out of your miter saw kind of a thing, and it's put a zero clearance insert and get a 645 tooth blade for super accurate cuts, blah blah blah, and then just use it for breaking down stock.
Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome, but just whacking 8/4 cherry planks to length is probably not the optimal use of a high tooth count, blade on there. Just get something that just cuts it down because it's going to get cut to its final length somewhere else. So, yeah, I could see that. That would be cool because you could have a nice blade in the miter saw. And then an aggressive aggressive one, self-feeding blade in the negative tooth angle, but just something that cuts faster.
Yeah. So, if you had that, you could set your radial arm saw up as a dado saw.
Mm-hmm.
Been watching Norm do that on the YouTubes,
right?
And you could still cut things to like chop stuff to length with it.
Yeah.
It's just a wider curve.
Lower that blade down a couple passes.
Just make that final skim pass with the dado.
Mm-hmm.
There's no deflection that way.
Yeah, I'm just going to clean up this last 3/4 of an inch here at the dado saw.
I see nothing wrong with this. So, question. Do you guys think, just thinking about the whole like miter saw, radial arm saw type thing, do you guys think there is going to be a point fairly soon where we have laser saws? Because we have laser cutters that can cut 3/4 inch hardwood, right?
Right.
You could quite easily put that laser head on a sliding gantry where you could hand feed it. Just zoop.
Yeah. I don't know if were there, economically speaking.
Oh, this has nothing to do with economically speaking.
Oh, okay.
Well, if you think about it though, right? You're just putting power into it. You don't have a consumable blade then. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess technically you have a consumable tube because it'd have to be like fiber probably or CO2. I was just for some reason I felt like I saw something recently that was like a freehand laser, kind of like
Were you watching Star Wars?
Yeah, maybe. Well, I feel like it looked like a Ouija board thing, but it was like a laser, and you could like basically pierce with it. It was like kind of like a laser scroll saw, which was kind of interesting. And it could be one of those like Chinese prototypes that was actually getting delivered on the balloon that got shot down.
Right.
We'll never see it now. But I mean, I don't know. I think there's a market. Epilogue, if you're listening, get on it.
Shaper and Epilogue can get together. Like a little handheld,
Shaper laser.
We
don't
router.
sell for stun.
Yeah,
maybe.
Now I think you'd maybe we won't see that because you'd have that burnt end.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that would be probably the issue is liability on somebody who just kind of lingers over a spot and starts their wood on fire. Yeah. Maybe. Unless there's like a feedback on it for heat or that would just shut it off after it detects, too much of a flare or something. But.
Patent pending here.
Yeah. Yep. No bad ideas.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is all intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we'll get ours.
You never know. Just never know. Yep. All right. So one of the questions that I have today, I'll put to the general audience and also to you guys is, have you ever seen a project or an item and decided to recreate said item, not knowing necessarily how you're going to get there? Mm-hmm. For example, I'm making a kind of a replica Harry Potter style travel trunk. Different from like the steamer trunks that we've done for the magazine, because those have been like frame and panel, relatively thick oak, kind of, these were the things that went on steamships in the early 1800s sort of thing for traveling folk. The Harry Potter ones seem to have a much lighter construction, kind of a thinner fiberboard maybe, or plywood, much lighter weight in their construction. I don't have one or haven't seen one. I've seen a lot of photos of originals and replicas online, but I'm making one, just plowing ahead, because that's what woodworkers sometimes do, is ignore sanity and just full speed ahead. And it's been kind of fun because it's a little bit of an engineering challenge, and it's also kind of a, curiosity balm to try and figure out how to do some of these things. So it's like, how do you keep it lightweight, but also sturdy enough that it's not going to crumple when inevitably somebody's going to sit on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're interested to see how that works out for you. We'll test it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like there's been a lot of times where it's like I've said, we don't need to buy that. I could build it. But then do I actually do it?
Right.
Not necessarily. Or there's like really ambitious stuff like what you're talking about, and then I lose interest, and it's like, oh, here's the next shiny thing.
Yeah.
So it's like
there is that. There is a delight in starting a project that does not stay with you necessarily until the end of said project.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like, if I see something and I want to make it, so I do this a lot with my bedroom furniture that I've built for myself. It's all based on some Thomas Mosier stuff. Generally, I have a tendency to way overthink stuff. Like, not like construction-wise. Like, construction-wise, I tend to go as simple as you can get for the most part, or as straightforward as you can get. But like, I will wait months to start a project as I'm like, the wheels are turning in my head on it, and like trying to figure out everything before I put something to it, or put a tool to wood. The one that I wasn't really sure on, and I kind of changed gears about halfway through it, was I don't know if you guys remember that sleigh bed I built probably 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. So like the frame, yeah, no problem. I'm like, how the hell am I gonna make this curved headboard? Like, hindsight, I should have coopered the dang thing.
Sure.
That way I could get that curve nice and gradual, and that would have been a whole lot less messy, because I think they were still finding walnut dust from that in the shop. Because I glued up these two big, huge slabs of walnut, and they were going to be the headboard. The headboard, with the sleigh bed has that curve in it. It's not a huge curve. I want to say, it maybe is 24 inches wide, 2 inches thick in the center, and maybe 3/4 of an inch on each end. So it's a gentle curve, and it's not symmetrical either. And initially, I'm like, I'm young. I'm a strapping lad. I can hand plane this curve into this thing. Nope. I got about 4 swipes of the scrub plane and said, hey, there's no way. Like, there is no way. No way in hell am I doing this. So what I ended up doing and this is just me trying to flip gears and figure out how to make it work. I ended up doing a router flattening sled that you'd use for like flattening a slab or a cutting board or something.
Okay.
I did that, but instead of having flat rails, I made rails the shape of the headboard. So then it was like this arched thing, right? So the router was going, in this little, hilltop hump the whole way. It worked great if you didn't look at the shop afterwards, because that hogged off a lot of walnut over. Like, I did it on a Saturday, and oh my god, there was so much walnut dust all over the shop. But yeah, that's been about the only thing that I've been like, oh, should have thought this through a little bit better before I started it. But there's always like random things that pop up, like, oh, didn't think about that when I was gonna build this.
Right.
But I tend to just stew on stuff. This is why I have not continued to work on that 9-drawer chest that is panels are glued up in the photo studio, because I know how the construction goes together, because I've built nightstands that were the identical construction, but like this has a lot of drawers. And I don't want everything to be solid wood, because I want the drawers to be solid wood, but I don't want the frames in between them to be solid wood. So it's like, all right, do I do web frames? Do I do a frame and panel back? Do I, it's working through all those other details that are kind of helping me procrastinate on this project. So, but sometimes it's just better just to close your eyes and do it.
Yeah,
just do it.
Just figure it out.
Yeah, and see, my enthusiasm usually wins out, and I start on something, and then I kind of screech to a halt where it's like, oh, now what?
Yep. Okay. So,
I have the general idea in my head. It's just like being able to just finish that off to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, let's just roll with that and see where we get, and then come up with the next thing. And
yeah, I will say, I don't necessarily do that for turning. Like, turning is one of those things that I feel like is easy enough to adjust on the fly, and you have to. Like, yeah, you absolutely have to.
Right. I mean, because with very few exceptions, there's not a lot of layout marks you can do on stuff.
Correct.
Where it's like, this is what the bowl's going to look like. I'm going to draw this profile in on the ends. And
yep, exactly. Yeah, it's very. I mean, you can visualize a bowl in your head if you can visualize stuff. But like, what happens if you cut in there and there's a big resin pocket? Or, hey, you start making a cut and there is a knot right in the middle of it. You can cut through the knot, but a lot of times your tool will jump, and then you'll end up with a cut that isn't quite the right shape. And if you don't get the right shape, then if you don't have a good shape, the right shape is not necessarily what you're going for, but if you don't have a good shape, then it's not going to look good. So,
right.
Sometimes it's just like, well, got a chunk of maple, let's see what it turns into. I kind of have an idea where I'm going, but don't know exactly what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and I'm guessing with like turning a bowl, you don't have quite the time and materials invested into it as like, say, a dresser, where you don't want to screw something up where you have to start clear over somewhere earlier.
Is there really ever a time where something gets screwed up so bad in furniture that it has to be started over? Like, I guess
I don't know.
I've never had a furniture project that I've been like,
it just depends how much glue you used.
I mean,
what type of glue
I guess what I'm
used.
getting at is there's always a way to fix it, right? Whether that's changing the design a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. Turning has a much less investment in time and materials. You can screw up a bowl bad enough that you can't do anything with it. Like, I mean, I've blown up a couple where it's like, well, I'll shoot. I mean, that's, that $80 blank is now in the garbage. But I feel like with most things, like, oh, guess what? My dining table just got 2 inches shorter. So what? Or, oh, these drawers are now a ½ inch narrower than what I wanted them to be. That's fine. That's cool.
Yeah.
I do know, what was the project? We built a project a few years ago on the TV show. It was Auto Alder. And I routed a groove or a mortise like on the wrong face. And then we cut a patch, glued it in place. planed it flush. Do I know what is it?
It is that bookcase.
Ha ha ha! That's right.
And if people are watching on the YouTubes, I'll show you the patch here in a second.
Because we patched it, and I thought we did a pretty good job of patching it.
Yeah. I literally, it's funny. The only reason I know this is I literally just seen this the other day. I'm in my kid's room, so ignore everything.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so it changed color not the right way all the time.
Correct.
And I think we posted it on social media or something like that, and there were a couple of people that were appalled that we didn't just make a new piece or something.
Come on. Who wants to start
there's
over?
been a lot of times where I've been making something and, okay, now we're going to have a walnut inlay in this. Where I'm not trying to match it. It's like, we'll make this look like a feature and, not going to put it on the other side too.
Yeah, I did that on the dovetailed tool chest I did for Popwood because the Photo Studio router collet was bad. Like, it won't tighten down. It'll tighten down, but it'll loosen up after 10 seconds. So I ended up routing a couple grooves a little too deep. And this was after about 7 hours of dovetailing. And I'm like, nope, that's getting an ebony accent in it. I think again, it's not that bad. Like the gentleman's dresser that Phil has, we built on the TV show.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of a hard time with some brass screws in that one. ended up with a bunch of brass screws broken off in the side of the case. Drilling them out, drilled right through the side of the case. And this had to have been like the third episode of the TV show I was on, and I'm like, oh my god, like look at this chump. But you know what? It gets fixed. It's fine.
It got fixed, and it looks great.
Yeah.
And then you find out that's every episode that you're doing. Then you don't feel so bad.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Unless it's Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. We got a good little ding on our workbench from him.
That's true.
Yeah, I think a couple times he's routed into or drilled into the workbench.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. To me, it's like I'll always do the very best that I can on a project, right? Like I'm working on a project, I'm going to do as good a job as I can. However, I am not going to beat myself up enough that it's like, oh, screwed that up. Like I'm going to scrap it. I guess my pride isn't big enough that I have to scrap the entire project and start over.
Sure.
It's like, screw it. It's good enough for me.
Yeah.
It's Phil's rule of 5.
Yes. From 5 feet away, you probably can't see it. And in 5 years, you won't know that it's there. So that's true. I have switched some projects from being like a natural finish to a painted finish just because of things.
Again.
But it's still a solid piece of furniture. And
adapt and overcome.
All right. Well, speaking of TV show projects, the free plan for this episode is one that holds a special place in all of our hearts. It's a cheese and cracker tray that we did on the TV show. And I think it was one of the last projects that Don was involved in before his retirement. So if you want to, we have a video version of it as well as the free plan. It's kind of a fun one because there's a little bit of cove cutting on it. Also is a nice small piece that you can do for a gift or have for entertaining. There's a small cutting board in it as well as a tray that you can use for, as we say, putting some crackers on. So you can find that on the show notes page at woodsmith.com/podcast or shopnotes.com/podcast. And we'll have a link to it on the description with the YouTube version of the podcast. So I think that wraps up another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. Special shout out to Tight Bond for sponsoring today's episode. They make the glue that we use here in the shop at Woodsmith and on the TV show. And there's a reason that we have it. It does the job and does it well. And we have several versions of it. The Mark Hopkins has a special place in his heart for their new Speed Set glue that has a strong initial tack on it. I'm a big fan of their liquid hide glue and Titebond 3. And there's always a bottle of Titebond glue out here. So if you're looking for more glue or the right glue for your projects, you want to check out Titebond. You can look at it at titebond.com. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time for the ShopNotes Podcast. Bye.